Hey guys, it's Janie. Welcome back to the Bookworms Buddy. It is time for my read-a-thon and wrap-up for the month. So, I know it's only the 30th, but I'm not going to have any time to finish another book for this month because things have been super busy. Like yesterday, we went and had lunch with my youngest daughter, and then we brought my granddaughter back with us, so then we went to Fall Festival at my oldest grandson's school, and we were there. Now today, we're just kind of hanging out, but tomorrow is trick-or-treating, so I'm not going to have time to finish another book. Not with the choices that I have in front of me. So I figured now's as good a time as any to do these wrap-ups. So I'm including my Nightmare Before Christmas, Jack Skellington Read-a-thon, and the wrap-up for the month of October. So let's get into it. So I read 11 books. I didn't do as well this month because, of course, you guys remember my family, my sister and her family were here for 2 weeks, so I didn't do as much reading as what I would normally do. So 11 books. Let's get started. So like I said, this is for the read-a-thon and my wrap-up. I'll let you know which ones were for the read-a-thon and whatnot. So here we go. The first one we've got here is The Dollhouse Murders. This is by Betty Wren Wright. This was for the read-a-thon. In this story, you've got Amy, who finds this beautiful dollhouse in her grandmother's attic. And she absolutely falls in love with it. There's little dolls inside, but this dollhouse is actually centered around murders of their family members and closely related to her grandmother. She doesn't want Amy to actually play with the dollhouse, and Amy just soon discovers why, because the little dolls inside the dollhouse begin moving on their own to depict what happened the night of the murders. And Amy gets freaked out after that, and that's all I'm going to tell you. It was a really cute story. I love this cover. This is actually the 35th anniversary edition because this book is older. Let's see when the copyright was. The original copyright was 1983, so it is an older book. So anyway, I rated this one 4 stars. I really enjoyed the story. It's a quick, fast read. Okay, so the next book I read was I Heart You, You Haunt Me. This was also for the read-a-thon. The prompt was something wrote in verse. This took me a couple hours to read. This is a story about Ava, who has this boyfriend, and he dies, and he begins to haunt her. And this is pretty much the story. It didn't go the way that I thought it was going to go, which was interesting. It was okay. I rated this 3 stars. It's obviously very fluid, and I read it quickly. So there's that one. Okay, the next one that I read, also for the read-a-thon, was The Christmas Bell. This one was for A Christmas Story, and I wanted to keep all my books, scary books, horror books. So this is why I chose this one. This one is about this ancient ornament that is found up in the attic of this house, and Anna is, or Rachel. Rachel is the one that finds this ornament. She wants to brighten things up in the house for, I think, her grandmother. And she gets a tree, puts the ornament on, and then something is attached to this ornament. Something ancient and evil, and it just starts to wreak havoc in the house. And that's the gist of the story. I didn't really like it. I'm glad it was a short one. It was only 160 pages. I ended up rating this 2 stars. It wasn't very exciting. There was not really a whole lot going on. So I didn't really enjoy that one. The next book that I read was Mr. Creature. This is by Chris Priestley. And yes, it was also for the read-a-thon. This one really, in a nutshell, is a retelling of Frankenstein. So we're following Billy, and he's like the town pickpocket. He's trying to survive. He's on his own. He's not very old. I think he was like, I don't know if it said it or not. It doesn't really say. I'm sure it says somewhere in the book, but he's not very old. And then he runs into Mr. Creature. That's what he calls him. And Mr. Creature is actually Dr. Frankenstein's monster. And they start hanging out, and they kind of start changing each other a little bit. But he's hanging out with Mr. Creature because he's there to help him. And Mr. Creature was promised a wife by Dr. Frankenstein. And that's pretty much the story. I rated this one 3 stars again. It was okay. I mean, it's more like a middle grade, I think. It was kind of a cute story, and there's, you know, a couple like touching moments in the book and this and that, but yeah, there's that one. Okay, the next one that I read, also for the read-a-thon, is The Clown in the Cornfield. I first discovered this book from Amber over at Secondhand Reader. She was talking about it. It sounded interesting. This is like a YA slasher. And yeah, I ended up really enjoying it. In this story, you've got Quinn. It's her and her father, and they move into this small town. What was that called? Kettle Springs. And it's really boring. And you got this group of kids, you know, they pull pranks and that kind of stuff to kind of liven things up. And then you got Friendo, who is the town's mascot. And it is a killer clown. And something goes awry, and the slashing begins. So that is pretty much the gist of the story. I don't want to say anything else about it, but I really enjoyed it. I gave this book 4 stars. It was very fluid, very easy to read, but yeah, it ended up being a really good story. I'm not sure yet if I'm going to pick up the second one. We'll see what happens with that, but yeah, 4 stars for that one. The next book that I finished was, ta-da, finally, Imaginary Friend by Stephen Chbosky. This is a big book, you guys. And having my family there, I didn't get to read it as much as I wanted to, but I did finally finish it this month. I finished it like around the middle of the month. This is really good. You got this mom and her son, and they escape the grasps of her newest boyfriend. His father actually died, and she got a new boyfriend, and he was abusive, and they escape to this small town, and her son ends up disappearing in the woods for like 6 days. And there were so many different elements to the story that I loved. There was kind of like parallel dimensions, and just, it was just really fantastic. He comes back from the woods, and things start to change in the town, and he's got a group of friends that kind of help him out on his way. And I don't want to say anything else because it was a roller coaster of a ride, you guys. I absolutely loved this book. Rated at 4 stars. The imagery was fantastic. Just all around, really enjoyed this story. Okay. The next one that I read, also for the read-a-thon, was Just Like Mother. This is by Anne Hetzel. This was another really good read. This is a story that starts as a cult story, and you got you got a sister and a cousin. You got Maeve and Andrea, and they grew up in this cult. They do finally get away from the cult, and it was a little unsettling on some parts because you didn't know who was freaking out, or who was going to do what, or who was genuinely happy to be out of the cult, or who was... It was just really unsettling in the story. You didn't know what was going to happen. I didn't know. I started out really enjoying Maeve. But then there was things she'd say and do, and I was a little like, what's going on? Same with her cousin Andrea. It was just really a roller coaster of a ride. I felt really apprehensive, and the whole thing with the cult was mothers. So Andrea and Maeve grew up with like 4 mothers, and that was the cult. The males were only good for one thing, and that was to make them mothers. And yeah, I really enjoyed this story, you guys. And so the whole story focused around that, pretty much, that cult life. I ended up rating this 4 stars. It was very, very fluid, and I did this book for eyes on the cover for that prompt. So yeah, I really enjoyed it. 4 stars. The next book that I read, also for the read-a-thon, was The Caro Hunt. This is by Darcy Coates. This is the second book that I've read by her. In this book, you've got this girl who she does tours of the Caro Hunt, this big mansion, and it's said to be haunted. There's to be all kinds of evil spirits or not evil spirits or whatever in this house, and that's a lot of the pull for people to join this tour because they're interested in the paranormal and stuff. There is one man, it's on this tour, who approaches her and says, hey, I want to fund a longer tour, investigation, whatever, for 2 weeks. So you get your people, I'll get my people, and we'll do a whole big investigation. So we've got a medium that shows up, we've got someone who does things differently, who's a paranormal investigator. The medium does not get along with this paranormal investigator very well. They've got their differences of opinions, but they do manage to kind of work together on this. She was taking the story in a direction that I really enjoyed because of things that were happening, but then it just went into a different direction, and it kind of made the story a little unrealistic for me. I mean, I know it's fiction, but I like to have a little bit of realism. I think Darcy Coates is a good writer, but I just think it was a little over the top on parts of it that has to do with the paranormal. But anyway, I ended up giving it 3.5 stars because I do like her writing, but it didn't hit the 4-star mark because it didn't feel realistic to me. Anyway, those are my thoughts on that one. So at this point, I was feeling like I needed a little bit of a break from the horror because I wasn't getting real good ones, and then there'd be a good one thrown in. So I decided to pick up Colleen Hoover's new book, It Starts With Us. A lot of people are saying that this book really was unnecessary, and it really was an unnecessary story, but I still liked it. I still enjoyed hearing from Atlas and, you know, going back to the first book and things that happened in the first book and his explanation for those things. I just really loved that. No, it may not have been necessary, but I still think it was an enjoyable book. I did enjoy reading it. I'm not going to give anything away, but really it's just Atlas, his continuing story with Lily, and then of course Ryle is thrown into the mix, but this is just really the continuation of It Ends With Us. Like I said, it didn't really have to be a book. I mean, it didn't really have to exist, but I liked it. I really liked it. I think I gave it 5 stars even, because I really absolutely love Colleen Hoover's writing, and I think that's what it is. She's an auto buy for me. Auto read, auto everything. Really enjoyed this. We actually did take a trip to Colleen Hoover's bookstore in Sulphur Springs, and that was very nice as well. Okay, moving on. Okay, the next book that I read was The Pariah by Graham Masterton. This was for the read-a-thon. This is for a book with a black and white cover. Graham Masterton is a great paranormal horror writer. That's really what he writes, and I've read so many of his books that have been fantastic, but this one just wasn't fantastic. This one is a story about these people who are losing their loved ones. They're dying, and they're coming back as ghosts, but not as what they remember them to be. They were evil, and it was just horrible. Like, some of the things that they were doing that wasn't realistic. And there's that again. It just wasn't realistic at all. Come to find out, these apparitions, these spirits, were affected by the David Dark, which was a ship that sunk centuries ago, and there was demons and all this stuff that was involved with that. The writing was okay. It was fluid. It's Graham Masterton. I love his writing. I ended up reading this on my Kindle because the font, again, was horrible. But, I mean, it went along okay. It was, you know, there was some creepy parts in there and this and that, but it just, no realism. I ended up giving this 3.5 stars. Yeah, I probably won't read that book again. Okay, and the last book that I read for the read-a-thon was Cujo by Stephen King. You guys, I was shocked. I didn't think that I read this book, but I did in fact read it back in 2013, and my opinion of this book completely changed. In 2013, I rated this book 3 stars, said that I thought that like the synopsis was misleading. I didn't like the mothers. I thought they just weren't very smart, and it was not Cujo related, and I don't know where all those ideas came from, but I take back all of this. I really enjoyed this book. 4-star rating this time. It was Cujo, surrounding Cujo in this more than the humans. And in this book, you've got a young boy who is Tad, who is having issues like a monster in the closet, and his dad has to write him up monster words that makes the monster stay away. And then on the other side, you've got Cujo, who is this dog that Tad actually meets the dog. But this dog gets bit by a bat and goes rabid. And that's pretty much the story. It's Stephen King. You can pretty much understand where the story goes from there. I really ended up enjoying this so much more than I enjoyed it back in 2013. The writing was fantastic. The 2 mothers that you read about in this story, I really ended up enjoying them. I don't know what it was. Maybe this time I actually really was in the mood for it, and I wasn't in the mood for it back in 2013. Sorry guys for my phone going off. So yeah, I really enjoyed it. 4 stars. So if you want to read a Stephen King book and you haven't read any of his stuff, try Cujo. You don't hear much about this book. So yeah, 4 stars on that. But that's it, guys. That's my wrap up. That's what I read for the month of October. The books that I read for the read-a-thon. There was one more book that I had to read for that, and that was Bag of Bones. I didn't get to it. Yeah. Anyway, if you've read any of these books, let me know, guys, what you thought of each of them, and you can put those in the comments below. But that is it for me. Thanks for staying tuned, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.